Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge you for being here. Wednesday, 9:30 after a 3 or 4 day, thing like this is a bit tough. So thank you for showing up, being here with your, interest and desire to learn a little bit and hopefully ask some interesting questions. I'm Josh McKibben. I'm a director with KPMG cybersecurity practice, and I've been, among other things, focusing on identity and access management and transformation in that space for some time. I have my esteemed friend and colleague, Kristina, from Cisco today, and we're going to kind of walk you through, we'll do a little bit more introduction in a second, but do a little intro, talk about consumer IM and digital transformation and what we're seeing in this space and how we've been working together at Cisco for a while now to help transform that Cisco from a consumer identity perspective. Kristina's going to talk us through a little bit about some of the nuances of the Cisco business model and how that's impacted through the consumer IAM program. And then we'll talk about the vision and outcomes of the program, governance processes and data, and where we really want to get to is some practical takeaways for you for your consumer IAM programs, some of the lessons learned that we've kind of gone through and we can share with you. I will state that this is one of two sessions. My colleagues and friends, Santosh and Mukesh, will be doing a session 2 right after this that will focus on the technical elements of the solution and the platform that we've been working through. So be sure to stick around for that. So this will cover mainly the governance and process data, and then Santosh and Mukesh will focus on the technical pieces. So with that, Josh McKibben, I already mentioned. Something interesting about me, I grew up on an island in Southeast Alaska. I was a commercial fisherman in my previous life, which is kind of an interesting transition. Maybe if over drinks I could explain how you go from being a commercial fisherman in Alaska to security and digital identity, but that's for another day. I've been at this for 15 years and really had been my pleasure to work with Kristina and the Cisco team over the last year and a half or 2 years. So, Kristina?
Yeah, Christina Williams. I'm a senior manager at Cisco. I lead identity and access. Interesting fact about me, I have over 25 years of martial arts and MMA experience, so some things I do on the side.
And it's come in handy to keep us in check, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I have a big background in product development and cybersecurity.
Great, thank you. So talking a little bit about customer IAM and the digital transformation, and we'd like to frame it up in a couple of key things. 3 key things: the consumer or customer lifecycle engagement model, 2, the contextual marketing, and 3, trust, security, and privacy. And these were both kind of the challenges in terms of the business model at Cisco that the consumer IAM program needs to enable and address, as well as I think outside of Cisco, really what's happening around consumer engagement models and digital engagement models for which consumer IAM is a key enabler. So just spend a minute and talk through a couple of these. So the customer lifecycle engagement, in the sales world, moving from kind of one time, actually let me kind of talk about Cisco specifically. So Cisco largely had been in the past a product company, right? With firewalls, network appliances, et cetera. The sales cycle and the customer engagement model in that product space is really different than in a software subscription reoccurring licensing model. And what it looked like is, generally the salesperson would have a relationship with the customer would place an order for devices or for product, that would be fulfilled, the product's delivered, and then the customer deploys and they're on their way. And then there's some services that would come after that, but the amount of digital engagement with the customer is pretty narrow. Fast forward to where Cisco is today, and Kristina can talk through some of the acquisitions they've made, but it's largely an integrated software and hardware company with a subscription and reoccurring kind of licensing model. So the amount of customer engagement and the way in which we're engaging with customers has completely changed. And this little figure 8 talks about, at the bottom there is, I don't have my glasses on actually, land. Thank you, land. So landing is, obviously getting in the door, making a sell, and then the second piece of that is the adoption. And we all know in a software as a service world, switching costs are low, right? There's tons of competition out there, and can be pretty easy to switch. So getting the client to actually adopt your software is a major part of the customer success kind of model that we're facing and we need to enable today. Then moving to the third is expansion. Once you are using widget X or service X, how do you get them to use X plus Y? And then coming full circle, renew. Make sure that they're continuing to renew, because again, in a software licensing model, either on a monthly basis or whatever, they have to continue to re-up and renew. So this new engagement model for digital interactions is at the heart of the consumer IAM program that Kristina's been leading and we've been helping with. I'll say the second piece, contextual marketing. And you know, we hear a lot about where consumer IAM programs live in the organization. And in this case, and Kristina can talk to this in a minute, but the chief marketing officer and the marketing organization is a huge proponent and supporter of the work that Kristina and the team we've been doing together. And that's important because especially you know, in a software organization where you have lots of different products, the way in which you're selling to or understanding your customer, frankly, it's been siloed in the past, right? And so now you want to know if customer X is using your product, if they've been clicking on your website, like looking at your next product. And in the old model, we had a really hard time, and Kristina can again talk to this, doing that. And so understanding the full 360-degree view of your customer and their interactions with your brand is a really key driver for the program. And then finally, trust, privacy, and security. And we all know, you know, the ABC soup of compliance and what customers are asking for of software companies. You know, NIST, ISO, FISMA, you know, all the regulatory compliance requirements. They want to know that they can trust you as they're putting data into your service. And for, you know, Cisco now runs multiple data centers of software as a service companies, and that trust is really important. So we had to make sure that we're preserving that trust as we're becoming that engagement model with the customer from an IAM perspective. Kristina, anything you'd like to add to this?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to cover a little bit about the profile of Cisco and what we have as a company, but I think in the spectrum of companies out there, I think everybody's going to face the same as they try to do this customer journey. We have about 73,000 employees, 610,000 partner users. Over 80% of our business is still sold through partners, and I'll talk a little bit later about how our partner journey is changing and evolving as we move more to subscription and recurring revenue. We have 840,000 customer companies. Cisco, as you all know, it continues to acquire a lot of companies. I think our website says over 200 acquisitions. I counted on our tracking system, 155 acquisitions, and that it doesn't seem to stop, right? We're going to continue to acquire. And what that does is, a lot of speakers have talked about, is we have lots of things out there. I think I jokingly call it, we have an identity crisis that we're tackling, because there's a lot of different identities out there that we're tackling. The other area of Cisco that you may or may not be aware of, most people are well aware of our networking business, but we do have a broad portfolio of different types of businesses that we have to support. So as you try to as we do a consumer IAM, we have to support all of our different businesses, and they're very varied in types. So that's been part of our challenge, as part of our solution, to be able to support all these different types of businesses as we bring this together. So the program I've been running is called One Identity, not to be confused with the product company. I picked the name before they picked their name, so I'm going to keep it. So what we're trying to do here in this journey is you have to thread the whole identity across, and many of us come from an enterprise identity background. But on the consumer side, and even the evolution over the last few years, it's been siloed, right? On the left, I'm aware, is our marketing area. Years ago, pretty much as long as they can get the email on Eloquel or any kind of other marketing systems, they were happy. I don't want you to log into your system. Most of our browsing on Cisco.com, actually only 7% of it is logged in. But now in the area of contextual marketing, they want people to log in. How can you know who I am and what I want to buy and take me through that journey without knowing who I am? So we are starting to integrate in systems. We do the Cisco.com, but we also do Cisco Live and Cvent and all these kind of other event marketing type events have been always separate. We are tying that all back into the system. So there's a lot of different type of users here that we're bringing in. There's the shopping experience in terms of trainings. How many trainings have I gone to? How many certifications do I have? That's, at Cisco, it's always been separate systems too. We're bringing that in to the system. Net Academy, as you might know, your certifications for CCNA or CCIE, and all those kind of certifications are getting brought into the system. Then you have our purchasing journey, our commerce experience. That's been part of our platform, getting pulled into the platform as it gets built into the new one. And then the IUs, I think, is the biggest transformation for us. We've always had a little bit of the licensing pieces and a little bit of the setup pieces, but largely all the SaaS acquisitions that we've had as a company have always been separate. But now when you're dealing with reoccurring revenue and SaaS and hybrid, even if I have an appliance on-prem and I'm tying it to some portal, I'm responsible for the customer's identity. So in that, you have to tie this back into the main platforms. The use of the product is also part of the system. And last, of course, the support. Our support has always been pretty much managed by us, but now all the different pieces from all the different acquisitions also have to bring it together. So this is the whole life cycle of this. It completely broadens the use of identity across this whole spectrum. Next slide.
Right, and so, in the face of the digital transformation, the software transformation of the organization, the reoccurring revenue and subscription-based revenue models, and everything that Kristina talked about, we set out to be very clear about what the vision and the outcomes were going to be from the program. And I think, as you're thinking about your consumer IAM programs, obviously it's very critical to have clear outcomes, clear focus, and this was used a number of times to get leadership aligned to what the program will be producing. So 4 key kind of pillars of drivers: enabling growth and innovation, enhancing user experience, reducing costs, and protecting the business. And then the ultimate vision here is a consistent consumer and partner IAM framework to drive growth and accomplish those objectives. And then at the bottom, a couple of the tangible kind of KPIs or KRI areas we wanted to really focus on in the program. And just use an example, speed the monetization of acquisitions is the expected outcome underneath enabling growth. Kristina mentioned that Cisco is a very acquisition-heavy organization. And if you think about the financial reasons why leadership would take on an acquisition, it's not just to acquire the revenue model that already exists and the revenue stream, but to enhance that. And Cisco has a tremendous amount of IP and possibility of enhanced value through acquisition. But it's a challenge if you're not able to take those consumers that are engaging with that brand already and then meld it in to create enhanced value through other product services. So this is a real key one for the program to be able to speed the monetization of those acquisitions. And then I'll just choose maybe one other as an example underneath protecting the business. Reducing, number 2, reducing security policy enforcement administration points. If you think about 150 essentially separate companies acquired and brought into the organization, you have 150 consumer identity trust enforcement points, right? Policy and administration points. So just from a pure risk management perspective, and we see this in the financial services industry, consumers, leveraging a spoofed account from one service going to the next, and the organization Cisco now has to be able to detect and should be able to respond and deal with that online digital trust and risk factor of these consumers. So another really important piece of the vision and the outcome. I'll talk briefly about kind of before and after in terms of the specifics of the program and what we've been building and working towards. And I know there's quite a bit of text up here. I'll just choose a couple examples. So if you think about the mindset from supporting customer identity and more of the way we talked about Cisco yesterday and where it is today, from a governance and policy perspective, before it's kind of IT-led defined policy and governance, kind of privacy a bit of an afterthought. But in the new kind of digital economy and with Cisco really being business-led and its adoption and support and privacy focus is a key element of benefit and requirement for the program. And we'll talk briefly about what that's meant in terms of our governance model in a second. On the identity management services side, really kind of moving from human IDs only, kind of many IDs per customer, to including human and devices, and then singularity of identity as a construct. And then on the access management side, multiple credential, single factor, all or nothing authentication, really moving towards multi-factor and risk-based authentication, risk-based device authorizations, et cetera. And then on the data side, this is very important for Cisco. Obviously, protecting and providing privacy of the data collected, but also using that data to help improve customer experience and sell and service customers much better. Moving from a siloed customer data and analytics model to really an integrated model, again, privacy-focused, predictive analytics and insights and machine-based learning. And then finally, kind of moving from made-to-order and kind of highly customized solutions the consumer program was delivering to standards-based, helping drive standard adoption, patterns, and experience for the customers across these different business models. So just kind of one identity defined in terms of yesterday and where we are and where we're moving towards, just a brief summary of that. And Kristina, maybe you can highlight this a little bit, but we wanted to share what the governance model looks like for the program, because we think this actually speaks to the level of strategic engagement that we have, the level of support at a senior leadership level in the organization. And I think you can ask yourselves in your consumer IAM programs, what level of support do you have? Where does your organization live? And just as a brief talking point here, so the colors represent different functions. We've got the business units in purple, IT is in the turquoise color, the trust and security organization in the light gray, and then kind of the operations in the blue. And in terms of the steering committee, we have representation from each of the major business units Kristina talked about, from the cloud security business unit, from the data center business unit. Each of those leadership is involved in the overall view and support of the program. On the IT side, we have the CIO, we have the privacy organization represented, we have multiple SVPs of IT, directors of ITs, et cetera. And then I misspoke, but on the gray, the security, the CISO as well as the Chief Privacy Officer, all constituents bought in, supporting and helping to drive the vision and support the program moving forward. Kristina, anything you'd like to add on this piece?
Yeah, very broad executive support's required to transform a siloed type of experience like this, because it is all-reaching because of that end-to-end life cycle that I talked of the user, that it spans across the entire business. So we had to have a very broad steering committee as a governance body to bring this together.
Great.
So I'm going to go over some of the key, kind of call it data model insights of what we went through as we designed what we did as a platform. The first one is around organizational tenancy model. This is, you have to have it anchored around the different companies that you have. So we're moving it to a model where the companies can manage their own identities, be it federation, be it I allow local accounts, I allow public emails, or I don't, whatever those kind of rules and constraints that different companies have, we're moving everybody into this organizational tenancy model so that they can manage their own identities or BOID, or just configure it in their systems what you want for your rules. We also need to do that because largely most systems in IAM tend to deal with users, but if I'm building a system that has to take us to the future, where say I'm doing orchestration for containers. If you tie it to even a personal account, what if I leave the company? If I leave the company, does my orchestration break? And if I tie it to some super user machine account or generic identity, it's out there forever? How do I regulate? How do I have to keep cycling passwords or whatever I'm doing, right? So you have to move it towards a paradigm where the organization owns it and controls what they do about their identities. The second area that we had to look at is, in the past, you think it's just a B2B. Cisco is a B2B largely company, but there's also B2C in some of our businesses. But also, as you take that journey from the beginning, when I first interact with Cisco as a maybe blog or I'm just surfing, I might likely put my personal email in there. I might not want to give my company email, right? So you have to allow users to engage however they want, and maybe it's social logins or what are those things. So we have to allow that personal and the business in our data models to do both, and then put the security in for varying ways of depending on how you're interacting. The other thing we put together is an attribute store. So in the past, we used to say, hey, these are our enterprise type, govern attributes. And if you're not one of those attributes, you guys take care of it. But in the world of PI, what happens now is they copy all the identity attributes onto their repository and then add their 2 other ones they want to make their offering work. So to prevent that and to govern it, we're building an attribute store where you can bring it together, that there's governance on it, so that you can start seeing what attributes are being used across the business and then be leveraged so that it's governed. The other area we have is, because of that partner model we have, you have to support delegated administration, right? Largely in the past, Cisco's been largely a distributor type partners is our main partner type, and then we have service providers. But even in the models that we have now in the customer success models, we have a life cycle partner where their responsibility on Cisco's behalf is to get people to adopt and renew the relationship. So what you would give, say, a disti that actually sold your product or an integrator versus the lifecycle partner may be different access. So you have to build these delegated administrator type relationships and govern it in a certain way for that. And the other area we support within the data model is machine accounts. So you can't think of just users that you have to do. Of course, we have a lot of devices at Cisco. We have a huge install base. So you have to manage the devices, and they're largely software-based now, and so they have to get updates and all sorts of things like that. We do have an IoT business. You have to think about APIs, too, because it's software-defined networking, where we're not going to rewire the cabinet. We're just going to issue an API, and it's going to rewire the network. So you have to control the APIs, and then there's a lot of use of bots. So the bots also have to be governed. And the last area we did, because we did the whole project based on privacy and security by design, is you have to know that all the regulations are saying, hey, I only want my data in Europe or Asia or Russia or China or whoever, or Southern America or whatever you want it. So we built the data model, so I can essentially, even though no matter how I'm deployed, I can shard the data out and take pieces of the identity store and move it to different locations, spin up, it's completely cloud native implementation. I can just spin up my cloud anywhere, drop in my data, and it'll run there. So if regulation says, hey, I only want, Germany, just picking on Germany, no Germans here. I only want my data in Germany, I can just spin up a cloud, put my stack there, deploy my data, and I'll be up and running. Okay?
Great, thank you. So just ultimate big transformation around the way we think about data that corresponds with the customer engagement lifecycle, corresponds with some of the marketing, corresponds with the trust, privacy, and risk principles we talked about at the beginning. So a lot of work and thinking and innovation done in that space. So just we wanted to leave you with some practical takeaways in terms of lessons learned, and maybe I'll take a couple and Kristina can jump in here. So team composition, customer-focused team that can operate at the speed of the business. And we've seen this where there's isolated identity management teams that kind of sit within the IT or the CISO's organization, sometimes insulary in their thinking and engagement. But for this type of real transformation, digital transformation enablement, it's absolutely critical the team is really customer-focused, understands product, understands the way that the sales teams are engaging with customers and customer expectations. So this is something that's been a real important part of training existing team members to think like this, and also adding in additional team support as necessary.
For adoption and standards, of course, because we have a lot of different stakeholders and BUs that we're integrating in solutions, you want to adopt a minimum standards for them to do it so that they can, what you really need and then what they're going to do, so that it's not everything on you. The other, of course, has been talked a lot about and everywhere is use open standards so it makes it easier for the adoption.
Yeah, the flexibility, this is a change concept. How do you get an organization that's been operating in a silo to now start adopting standards? We have to take a flexible change management approach, moving towards more standardization a bit later on. So just really from a drive for parity of enhancements or functionality and platform, and transformation is hard. So we know that really the role of change management is really important in everything that the team has been doing, helping to articulate what the vision is and what the next step looks like for each of the impacted stakeholders. That's really on the program to do that. The impacted stakeholder groups, the services organizations, all these organizations, they're willing and want to change because they know that transformation is important. But really it's this team and the consumer IM team that's helping to articulate that change and working with them to realize that change. So not just the technology and the data platform piece, which we'll talk about next, but that was a key piece. We're out of time, maybe.
Yeah,
Architecture, Kent, you want to wrap us up,
Yeah,
Kristina?
so along with our steering committee, we also formed an architecture council, bringing in a bunch of the BUs also so we collaboratively worked across the architects on this. And then, of course, adoption is everything. You have to make it business value led, and that's been at this. So we don't have a lot of time, like we're actually out of time, but any questions? Yeah, go ahead. I think the biggest change is the hardest one that we're faced is just change management, is to focus more on change management, because we not only did build a cloud native platform, we're also doing the brownfield migration and transformation now too. Having to do both, the change management is very challenging. Yeah, we do manage that. We have a lot of fine grain, other kind of access control that we have in our system. We've been using fine grain. It's more on the enterprise solutions that we do that are customer facing. We do fine grain access, and both on a data level and an application level to control that.
And I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that in the next session as well. The technical deep dive can help address that a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah, I think, that slide's meant to really articulate where the organization had been from a consumer IAM perspective and where we know that we have to be to make this successful. And so ultimately, this also gets back to the minimum standard that we require or expect, and then the leeway that we give different business units to implement accordingly. And so the takeaway there is that there's a couple of minimum standards to create a minimum acceptable experience for customers, if you will, that we're expecting to comply and for them to implement, both from a UI but also from a data perspective. And then there's some, again, leeway given them, at least in the interim, to continue to implement other pieces of the IAM model, and then later as we evolve to have them take on more of that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we can take it offline if you have more. That's right, the policies and standards. Yeah. I think we have time for one more question. Anyone else? Go ahead.
We have designed the attribute store. We haven't rolled it out yet, but in terms of all this has to be pretty quick because we are supporting a large business. So there's going to have to be we're going to build in a governance layer that's going to let them. We largely do because Cisco's so big. We have to build in a lot of self-service to make it happen. Otherwise, we can't, as a team, sustain the support. No, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And again, stick around. The next session, we'll talk about some of the technical pillars of the work together and the solutions we've been delivering with Cisco. So stick around. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.